Welcome into another episode of the Sick Podcast with Draft Vogel, the sickest NFL draft podcast on the planet. We got running backs on the mind today. Figured that'd be a good topic with everything going on, especially since last week we talked about the tight ends. We talked about 22 personnel. This will put a really nice finishing touch on that as well and what to expect in the NFL this year. But with that being said, we got Sammy with us in the background in the studio. So, Sammy, let's get this thing rolling. Let's go.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Draft Vogel.
With the first pick in the 2021 NFL Draft. The first pick in the 2022 NFL Draft. With the first pick in the 2023 NFL Draft.
The sickest NFL draft show. It's gonna be sick.
And welcome in again. We're getting into the running backs. Joining us is the co-host, Justin Gamble. And coming from Colorado, Justin, how are you doing, man?
I'm sweaty, man. I just got back from hockey, and it's 95 outside here, just like it is where you are. So I'm just trying to stay cool, buddy.
Oh, yeah. No, and I just seem to recall one time you were playing hockey. I said, don't get hurt. I think you got hurt that night.
I think that was like, what was that, like 2-3 years ago when I tore my ACL or something?
Yeah, it was a while ago. Yeah, it was a few years ago.
Yeah, you jinxed me that night, bud.
I did. I'm sorry. That's why I'll just always tell you not to go break a leg because, I mean, you did it. So
I've slightly recovered, so I think
that'll help you. So real before we get started, I had a really funny story happen, or I guess it's kind of cute. Everything that you want as a dad. And so it was Sunday. And my daughter came in. I was watching the race because I'm a NASCAR fan when it's not the football season. And she comes in and she's got I think she had my sister's phone. And she goes, and they were showing me that they were watching the wide receivers episode because she wanted to watch Daddy's podcast. So everything settled. Everything came to full circle there as a dad.
We got fans, man.
We do. Yeah, we do. And the last one hit 1K in the first 24 hours. So we're really grateful for that. But now we're going to continue that on and get into some running backs. And so in this outline today, we got some good things to get into. Obviously, running backs has been a really hot topic here lately because of the running backs getting together and wanting to get paid more than they're getting. They're one of the few positions in the league, if not, it may be one of the only positions in the league that their average salary is dropping by the year, whereas everyone else's is rising. And so it has been a really hot topic. And I thought that talking about running backs and what we're looking for as scouts would be a great place to start. And where best to start with? Well, how many different roles are there, Justin? What's the general overview of the running back position?
That's an interesting question. I think it's changed a lot over the years. The way I kind of look at it is there's a few different archetypes of like what running backs fall into these days. And it's, are you a good receiving back? And this is not just running back. This is what I would say are like are successful NFL running backs, not just any, because there's a ton. But the way to be successful is you can be smaller, but you can be a receiving dynamo. You know what I mean? You can be Jahmyr Gibbs. You can be a slasher with, burst and speed like Dalvin Cook, who might not be the most physical guy, not the best receiver, but quality enough to where he's, he can contribute. But he is a slasher and a home run hitter at his core, Dalvin Cook. Or there's the guys like several years ago, maybe a decade ago, like the Mark Ingram types with the power, the vision, the guys who keep the offense on schedule. They can give you 35 carries a game, and they don't look worn down the next game. Like those guys can beat up a defense as opposed to the other way around. Then there's the type that's kind of everything in one, which is like Bijan Robinson, like we just saw come out, who has absolutely dynamic receiving ability. He is as shifty and as much of a slasher as anybody. He's big, he's physical, he can carry the load. He's good in pass protection. He kind of does everything almost at an elite category. So that's kind of like what you would draw up in a lab. But then if you can't have that, you got to settle for the Dalvin, the Mark Ingram, or the Jahmyr Gibbs. If we're gonna put him in those three different categories, that's kind of what is successful in today's NFL.
Right. So starting with the bell cow, which is sort of a dying breed in the league, the bell cow I think is a good place to start. And when we talk about them, they're not necessarily great receivers, They're usually good pass protectors, guys that can, step up and make a block on a free linebacker or edge rusher, whatever, whoever's coming off. But they're guys that you mentioned, like Mark Ingram. I think Derrick Henry is the ultimate bell cow running back. He's a guy that can take 30 carries a game and really keep the offense on schedule. Very rarely is he tackled for a loss. And he has that home run ability, too, when he gets in the open field. I think that's a big part of being a bell cow as well, is having enough speed and enough contact balance that when you get into the open field, you're still a mismatch on that secondary.
Nick Chubb, something like
Chubb.
that.
That's another great example. Yep. So we've got a few of them that are left in the league, but ultimately everything's been started to be replaced by this rotation, right? Getting 3 or 4 different running backs. I think the Patriots probably started this in the NFL and made it somewhat. How many times are we going to say that on the show? The Patriots started this.
They invented something new as usual.
Or just took what was working, because I think ultimately it worked up from high school into college and then, trickled up. But the Patriots were the first one to successfully really use a rotation in the NFL. And so when we start talking about bell cow and having that, you talked about some of those archetypes, the receiving, the slashers, those on and so forth. If you were building a rotation, let's say 3 deep, that's typically what people run now, 3 deep. What are you doing with that rotation?
I mean, typically you'd want kind of maybe even like what the Browns had a few years ago with you have Nick Chubb, who is your, 30 to 35 carry a game guy if you have to. And he's the physical man, but he's also has enough speed. Then you have Kareem Hunt, who is a big-time receiving threat, has enough speed, has enough wiggle to where he is going to give the defense a little blend of something different. Now, instead of Nick Chubb running straight at him, they got a guy who's going to dance around him and, might lower his pads, might not, but he's really going to challenge you in space, and he's going to do some things like that. And then, I think if I was a GM building a team, I'd want two of those type of guys. And then your third guy might be the smaller speed guy who is kind of, he's hopefully a good receiving threat, but he's also someone that is your home run hitter, or at least your jitterbug in open space, to where he is probably not the most physical, but he's the guy that you can say changes the pace of kind of the offense and gives the defense a whole different look and keeps the bigger guys, less tired.
We definitely saw this, and going back to what I said with the Patriots, you go back a few years ago, they had that room. We saw James White play with them for a decade, who was a receiving running back. He would catch 70 passes a year, and obviously be more productive than a lot of receivers in the league. And then Brendan Bolden, I think, was kind of that. They used him as sort of that home run hitter.
Oh, so many.
Vereen. Yeah. These guys were those guys that were used sparingly, but they were the home run hitters. If they could get the lane or get into space, they could make a guy miss and gash a defense for a long time, for a good gain, if not straight to the end zone. And, so now we've seen that a lot of teams rotate through that. There's an interesting thing that I pulled up on Twitter. I guess it was last week maybe 2 weeks ago now, when that running back discussion really first started, because I think that there was a meme that was going around that was displaying the leading rusher in the Super Bowl for the winning team in just that game. And none of them over the last 12, 13 Super Bowls have been paid more than like $2 million that year in their salary, which is really, and a couple of them were wide receivers too, which made that really interesting. I think the Seahawks leading rusher when they beat the Broncos was Percy Harvin, not Marshawn Lynch, in the Super Bowl. Yeah. And so I took it a step further and went ahead and looked at the roster construction. What was their top paid, their leading rusher for the season? What was he paid? And for the most part, you have to go back to Marshawn Lynch before you find someone who is significantly paid on a Super Bowl team.
Yeah.
So when you have that trend, we're ultimately all trying to copy the trends of what a winner has done, right? The winning Super Bowl team. That's why Eagles go win it in 2017. They beat the Patriots. Everybody is looking for a rotational defensive front, which when we get into defensive line, that's going to be a huge part of the discussion, is the rotation. And then, obviously, the Chiefs, I think, really opened up the 11 personnel for a while. People wanted to build that up and make that into the successful, offensive component to their team, which was very successful. But in that light, with this running back discussion, how difficult is it for a team to sit there and go, you know what? I think we need to go ahead and pay this running back, $12 million this year.
I mean, I think it's easier to do like maybe what the Giants did and pay a guy 1 year, but I think it's very, very tough to pay a guy a long-term deal because running backs just don't age well. Like it's the nature of the game. They're not going to get less worn down. Their legs aren't going to get more pop and more energy. They take hits. That's just the way it goes. And I don't think, Todd Gurley, Lev Bell, who else? So many running backs have elite primes, only to drop off so fast that as like myself evaluating prospects for a long time now, those were the first guys that I think I kind of had to be like, what's going on? Like, what are running backs really at their core? Like, are they different than most running backs? Did they drop off for a certain reason, or is that just the way that their bodies, the way that it naturally will happen for everybody? And I think the more and more I watch, I think that's just the way it naturally happened. They weren't special. Nothing really happened. They had some knee stuff, but that's the point. All running backs, their knees start to go, their feet start to go, their legs get tired. I think it's easy. Like the Giants, I don't think they're going to win a Super Bowl this year. But I think paying Saquon on a 1-year deal, that's fine. But if you lock him up for 4 or 5 and give big money, you're doing it wrong. Now you can't pay younger guys. Now you can't pay receivers. You're going to have to rely on the draft really to win with all these young guys, and that's very tough to do. So it's got to be short-term stuff.
I'm glad that you brought up Todd Gurley and Le'Veon Bell because both of those guys had contracts, huge multi-year contracts that were worth
as well.
16. Yeah, Zeke Elliott's another great one. 16, 17, $18 million a year. Todd Gurley never made it to that part of his contract. He was already out of the league by the time he was supposed to get paid.
Yeah.
And Le'Veon Bell, we all know what happened as soon as he left Pittsburgh. He sits out the year, he goes to the Jets, and just wasn't the same player. And I think that's another thing that's difficult. That's another thing that's very difficult to do. And Le'Veon Bell is the prime example for that. It's so hard, man, to sit out a football for a year and then come back into it and expect to be a star player. I mean, not just Le'Veon Bell, Deshaun Watson, we just saw that from. I think that a lot of Watson was rust this past year with the Browns that he just hadn't played in a long time, and it's a different speed when you're playing on the field. So going back into
playing sports anyways,
Absolutely.
And then to come back rusty, like it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
And, we hope that he's going to come back. I think some of us do. Maybe I don't as much. But we hope that he's going to come back.
For football's sake, sure. But as a human being, not so much.
Not to open a can of worms or anything. But,
sorry.
I think we do hope that, for the sake of football, that, we can see people come back after not playing for a year and be able to play well. I think Calvin Ridley's going to be one of those guys we're going to be looking at. That's another thing too, that's for a whole nother episode, but the gambling stuff, are these year-long suspensions for gambling going to hurt players in their careers? So there's so many different factors to it. Yeah. So the running backs have kind of been threatening a little bit, I think is a good word to use, about, do we sit out? Do we maybe not play this year? What are we going to do about, this situation and create leverage so that we get paid? And I don't know if there's a solution to NFL running backs at this point in time getting paid.
Well, I think what I've heard, mostly from people on Twitter, and I don't have a good answer for this myself. I'm not splitting atoms. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. And, a lot of this money stuff is it's confusing to me. I'm like, I don't know what I would do. I'm not a front office of a football team, but people are saying, well, they need more guaranteed, or they need longer deals when they're drafted, and blah, 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 blah. With that, I don't know if that would really do it. That might make football less good as a whole, because now teams naturally by default or whatever have more money locked up on running backs early on, and so they can't pay other positions. So now they're all kind of struggling to find, let's say the team wants to sign Devontae Adams and you would have had the cap space. Well, now they don't, because they paid a rookie running back a bunch of years and long term. That's just what I've heard people trying to say, and it doesn't make sense to me. So I don't know. I don't think there's really a solution to what's going on right now. I think just, unfortunately, it is what it is. And switch positions, or just accept that, this is your fate. So I don't know, man. I feel bad for the guys as people, obviously, but paying a running back big money in a long-term contract is basically paying them for something they did, not for something they're about to do for you. And that's silly to me. That's just so silly.
Yeah, and that's the tough part about it all. And I got on, I think it was Pennsylvania radio a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about the Barkley potentially holding out, which he ultimately didn't.
Yeah.
But, we've seen it with Josh Jacobs is holding out, Jonathan Taylor's holding out, star running backs that have been very productive the last couple of years are holding out right now. Sony Michel retires out of the blue. I can't imagine that had nothing to do with the running back Zoom call last week. But, I think that there's not a solution for NFL players and right now, which really sucks. Ultimately, I think that the way that I kind of look at it is supply and demand, basic economics.
Yeah.
And
when you look at
when you look at high school right now, I've got I could say I have the privilege right now of watching, a 3A school. I've got a 1A school in my area. They're going to play a 5A school this week, or when they open up here in a couple weeks. And what I've noticed is the position that a lot of kids want to play. And this is just because of the nature of high school football. It's tough to find a good quarterback that can deliver the ball, that can get it out on time at that level, is play running back. Running back, you are the star. And I think that, a lot of these teams that I'm watching right now, they've got 2 or 3 guys on their rosters right now that are really good at running back. One of them I know he's going to be a D1 player, and he might be doing it at running back and wide receiver. But my point basically being that you're a star in high school because you play running back, you touch the ball a lot, and you build those carries. Then you go to college, and colleges have already picked up on, hey, we can't run these guys, 300 times a year because 1, we can't rely on them to stay healthy, and 2, they don't want to come to the school. They want to split carries and be ready for the NFL. And so every school now is running really 2-3 running backs. And so when you take that bottleneck going from high school into college, and then from college into the NFL, you got a double bottleneck there with all of this talent. It's just like watching an interstate go from 4 lanes to 2, from 6 to 4 to 2. And it's all in like a 2-mile stretch, and it's so backed up. There's so many people there. I think that's what's happened to the running back position, ultimately because everyone is running these rotations to try to make their careers last longer. And as a result, when you get to the top level, it's like, well, you just run for 4 years, and I've got guys coming out that are just as good, if not better than you, and they're fresh.
Yeah.
So you got to cut it off at high school, man. That's not going to happen, but that's where it has to. That's a fix.
Well, and every single year too, it's all the rage, man. We will follow the recruiting rankings, and we're checking which running backs are going to which school, and it's awesome. It's so fun to watch because it's still a premier position to watch even in college, but. Yeah, now their trajectories change where these guys would go to places where they know they're going to get run into the ground because they want to showcase themselves. Now you see guys choosing schools where, there's a lot of premier talent all stuffed in one bag, but at least they get to share carries, so they go to the NFL fresh. I would say if I'm giving any running backs advice, I'm not saying switch to receiver because a lot of them can't just based off their size and their learn to catch. We just saw Jahmyr Gibbs sub 200, right? Get drafted. They would have taken him at 6 overall or whatever. And we saw in that leaked video or whatever. They would have taken a sub 200 NFL running back at 6 overall. That is
Bijan Robinson.
Yes, that is craziness. But you know why? He's fast and he can catch. Learn to catch. Be a receiving threat. Be a guy that they can split into the slot or use in multiple formations and multiple scenarios and multiple, can you play the 2-minute drill as a running back? Because I don't want to have to go empty because our running backs can't catch. Can you be on the field at all times, and then you can get drafted high still? But I think the guys like Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, even Jonathan Taylor to a degree, a lot of these guys that cannot catch or are not great receivers, your value is dwindling because so many of these young guys can come in and they can catch. And they can be on the field for a full 60 or whatever, you know what I mean? They can be on the field as often as the offense would need them. So that's the only thing that I think is some advice to young runners is just learn to catch. Help yourself out.
Yeah, this is the perfect time to move into this part where we talk about the impact of last week. I spent a lot of time talking about I could foresee the league going in a direction a lot of the NFC going into 22 personnel, 2 running backs, 2 tight ends on the field at the same time. And, I gave the example last week of Atlanta, where you have just excellent size, excellent athleticism across the board. It's going to be so difficult to defend. It's not just Atlanta that's doing that. We watched Green Bay's got 2 great running backs that can do a lot of different things, and A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones. And what did they do in this draft? They went out and they got 3 tight ends.
Yeah.
Detroit is another team. They went out, they got a tight end. They had a great 2 in Daniel Wright. They add Sam Laporta, who's a guy that I know that you like, and naturally everybody else likes because he's from Iowa. And he was their number 1 tight end. But, and they go add Jahmyr Gibbs. And now all of a sudden they're equipped to go run 22 as well, with David Montgomery out of the backfield and put Jahmyr Gibbs into the slot. And, you got Amon-Ra St. Brown that can do a lot. He's maybe not a true X, but he can play that role.
Yeah,
other tight
he's
ends
a volume catcher. Yeah.
Right. So you have a lot of teams in that conference right now gearing up to run a lot of 22 personnel. And so that goes right back to the point that you were just talking about with Jahmyr Gibbs as a perfect prime example, and Bijan Robinson being a great receiver. I think that the real key to being a successful running back and making a career happen as well, that we haven't mentioned as much, is pass protection. I think that's the start. Where the premium at the position is starting to head. If you can catch and you can be effective as a receiver, you don't have to be great. As long as you can be effective, you're good.
Yeah.
Right. As long and you can pass protect. And a great example of a guy who can do that is Tajay Spears, who goes in the 3rd round of the Tennessee Titans. So I think that pass protection is where we're starting to kind of head, and that's going to become more valuable, especially as the league goes into more 22.
Yeah, and for those listening at home, I don't think it's necessarily like correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe this is just my thoughts on it. Pass protection is nice, but I don't necessarily think you have to excel in pass protection, or that's something you should value super, super, super high when you're evaluating running backs. But if you are serviceable, at least as a pass protector, or can just stick your nose in the fan for a little bit, now defenses don't know what's coming based off the personnel. If you're a running back who they know, he'll at least, try to pass protect, or he's shown that he can do it. Now, when you're on the field, we don't think, he used to be just a receiver or just a receiving back. Now we know they're passing. If they know the offense can use you in multiple ways, now it kind of limits the defense's minds. It limits what the defensive coordinators can do, because now they know this guy's versatile. He's not just on the field when they do this. Now they can't play after tendencies. So I think it used to be like for instance, Jahmyr Gibbs. He's not going to pass protect. So the defenses now know when he's on the field, run right at him or expect the pass and sit back and we'll wait. You know what I mean? Because they know Detroit's not going to put him out there to protect Jared Goff. They're going to put him out there because they want him to catch the ball, or at least be a potential carrier of it. So I think the more versatile you are, meaning can you protect the quarterback, that's huge, like you said, for running backs, because now it just makes it to where they can keep you on the field, and they might not throw the ball to you, but that's okay this down, because you're not a bad pass protector.
You know what? I'll clarify that thought, because that's a good point that you bring up. I think that we go back to the bottleneck. 6 lanes, down to 4, down to 2, and it all happened in 2 miles. That I feel like that's Nashville. You leaving Nashville, you get out of Franklin, it goes from 6 down to 4 and then down to 2, and you're just like it's always bottlenecked, always. And so same thing applies here. A lot of players now can run and catch. When you look at the running back position as a whole, most running backs in the league can run and catch. And that's why I was pointing out that the premium now is going toward pass protection, right? Because if you can do all 3, which ultimately is what we were kind of discussing as like bell cows, they're not receivers. Well, now if you want to be a bell cow, you got to be able to do all 3, which is almost impossible. But that's why the rotation's there. If you've got 3 guys that are all serviceable in those 3 facets, running, receiving, and pass protection, that seems to be where the value is. That's why you got a guy like Bijan going eighth overall. That's why we're going to see guys like Tajay Spears be productive. Kendre Miller might even be productive as well.
Right.
With
Tank
the Saints.
Bigsby is another guy.
Bigsby, and very underrated as a receiver.
Yes.
Like he wasn't used as much because of their quarterback issue, but he's very underrated as a receiver, and he's a solid pass protector. And so when you look at those guys that went ahead of other guys, right? Chase Brown went in the 5th round, which very productive running back at Illinois, really solid receiver, not a great pass protector.
Right.
I think that's
the NFL used to value that a lot more. It used to, because it was more of it was less of a passing league, I think. The NFL used to be so much more of a run the ball on 1st and 2nd down, throw the ball on 3rd down. So now if the running back's in there on 3rd down, back in the 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if the running back's still in there, he's not catching the ball. He's in there to pass protect. And that's changed a lot now. Now running backs are used as decoys. They're used as slot receivers. They're used as actual running backs. They can catch out the backfield. They just do so much more. So I think like you're saying, you have to be able to do so many things to separate yourself from the pack now.
Right. That's the tough part.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, rotations created this pay disparity, right? And we're going to keep going back to the pay thing because it's such a big story. It's such a big part of building a roster. I think that I heard on Sirius Radio that if the Eagles had paid Miles Sanders, they would have paid him more than what they're paying the 5 running backs on their roster right now. That's a stat.
And I mean, I get that the running backs have an issue with that, but you can't tell me you could say that to a running back in the NFL and that would make sense to them. I mean, they would have to think for a second and think, that's silly. Like, that doesn't make sense. Because it doesn't. That's foolishness. There's so many running backs coming out of college now that you can draft early and basically rent for a few years, get their best years out of them, and send them on their way. It sounds bad, but that's just the nature of the beast, man. That's the reality of the NFL and the reality of football.
That's what people have won Super Bowls doing. That's all there is to it.
Right.
The last 10 years, we've seen Isaiah Pacheco this past year was the difference maker, a 7th round draft pick out of Rutgers, who I was shocked that he went in the 7th round, when he did, because I'd watched him. He was a super explosive. He didn't have a great line at Rutgers, but he was a mismatch, dude. He was a mismatch.
You're big and run a 4.3. You're going to go before the 7th round. That was shocking to me, even.
That's what you would think, yeah. But you can get guys in the 7th round is the point, and go win a Super Bowl.
Right.
Mind blown.
Right. And it kind of brings up, would you rather have Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the 1st round for some reason, or Isaiah Pacheco in the 7th? And that's another discussion, is why the NFL is so bad sometimes at drafting running backs or even evaluating them. But like I said, that's a whole other topic for now. Like you said, drafting a running back in the 7th and winning a Super Bowl is wild.
We got time. We got time. We can get in this topic. Let's talk about that. So, pose the question to yourself, Justin, because you raised it. Would you rather draft Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the 1st? Would you rather draft Isaiah Pacheco in the 7th?
Well, the thing is when Clyde Edwards-Helaire came out, I said I wouldn't take him in the first 4 rounds. I said, there's no way. You can't get me to. He's slow. He ran a 4.6 something. He's 5'7". Like, there's no world where I'm taking him before rounds 5. Like,
all right. So that's a bad question then that you posed.
Okay.
So let's make it a little bit harder. Would you rather take Bijan Robinson in the 1st or Isaiah Pacheco in the 7th?
I was having this discussion the other day in a group chat, and we were talking about are running backs really undeserving of getting paid? And we said yes, based on the way it's set up, but that doesn't mean that when running backs are in their primes that they're not game changers, right? So if you believe a running back is a legit game changer and your Super Bowl window is in the next 3 to 4 years, then I think that is when you take that guy in the 1st round. That's when you draft a Bijan, because you say, all right, we're already good enough as a team to make a playoff run, even get to a Super Bowl. That is when a guy like Bijan Robinson, a special talent like Bijan, can set the offense over, because now you have an absolute dynamo in the backfield, as well as, a complete team elsewhere. But I think if you are a team that's kind of rebuilding, possibly, Why take Bijan? Unless you think like our window is approaching sooner, but maybe you're not there yet. But like, it's like Josh Jacobs for the Raiders. Paying him doesn't make sense because they're not good with him. They're not good with him. So why pay him and say, good, we got our star running back, so we can suck for 4 more years? Who cares? Let him go. I understand his frustrations, but running backs they don't make a bad team that much better. They don't. They just simply don't. But they can make a good team great. And I think the Chiefs happen to be just so good that Pacheco was really all they needed. They needed a 7th-round kid out of Rutgers to make them, a Super Bowl champion. I think they, violently misevaluated Clyde Edwards-Helaire, especially that was the year with J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift, Jonathan Taylor. You have other elite talents out there at running back, and they happen to take Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And I think that was just them, kind of buying into the LSU hype, the national championship hype, the production. But it was a mistake because they could have had some other players.
That was 2020. They went to the Super Bowl when he was a rookie. Was that the year they beat the 49ers? Or was that the year that they lost to the Buccaneers?
I think that was the year they lost. If I'm almost positive they lost to the Bucs that year. Right. But that's the thing, is like Clyde Edwards didn't really play much at all in the Super Bowl, especially that year. I don't
he played. He started several games, and I think his snap counts were in the 300-400s that year. He was somewhat productive. I know that he was very productive week 1 in fantasy because I was playing DraftKings, and I killed it because I made him my running back. I knew they'd use him a lot week 1 because he's fresh. And,
he did the opposite of most running backs. It was like normally like they start slow and then they like work their way into the lineup more and more and more. He did the opposite. They wanted to use him, you could tell, and then they were like, like we can't use him. He's slow. He's small. He doesn't do anything. Like he doesn't have the power to run between the tackles. We gotta kind of fade him out of the lineup, and they did. And now I don't know what his career is going to look like, but I don't think he was worth that first-round pick. I think one thing I was looking at running backs taken in what rounds. I was looking at like drafthistory.com. Mm-hmm. What I realized is the NFL does a pretty good job of drafting all the starters that are probably all the quality running backs in the first 2 rounds. They rarely let a lot of good guys get out of the first 2 rounds unless there's like, crazy circumstances. But they do have a problem with drafting 1 or 2 horrible ones in the top 2 rounds. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is one of them. You know what I mean? So it's like they're pretty good at getting everyone right, except there's like 1 or 2 that they happen to just draft, probably because of production or some other LSU hype or national championship hype, something like that. And that is where they make mistakes.
Well, yeah, and then we always look at Alabama running backs. There was one that came out. I cannot think of his name. Trent Richardson went top 3 and didn't pan out. Yep, didn't pan out at all for anybody.
Still not sure what happened to him.
I mean,
generational in college.
That picture that you saw of him, I think with the Raiders in a preseason game where there's a hole that's as big, that's wide enough that my grandma walking with her walker could walk through it, and he's running at the mile.
Yeah, he was like, nah, I don't think so.
What goes into
and
the
it
pile.
Wasn't like he was small either. He was a big dude who had speed and physicality. I don't know what really went down with him, and I mean, those are the rare ones. Those are the rare misses, I think, that if you're a team, no one's going to blame. No, I don't think anyone blamed the Browns for taking Trent Richardson. That's the thing. No one was like, oh, stupid, like we told you so. It was consensus. He was fantastic. I think he's just one of those, just like we have the Isaiah Pacheco's that are stars that get drafted in the 7th round. You have the Trent Richardsons randomly that'll go in the 1st round, and they just don't pan out for whatever reason. And a lot of it has to do with mindset or, the speed of the game changing, something else. But, I think overall, the NFL does a pretty good job of getting everyone right, except those few guys that they just overdraft. And I think even like Twitter, a lot of Twitter people were like, Clyde Edwards-Helaire shouldn't have gone that high, but I don't know. It is what it is. Tough sport.
So the big argument for them wanting to get paid is that they are absolutely crucial to a team, which is the truth. You have to have one. You can't go into an offense and go, you know what? I got Jalen Hurts back here, or I got Patrick Mahomes, or I got Justin Herbert. I'm going to throw the ball every single play. It doesn't work like that. You have to have a running back. So when you're weighing how crucial they are You look at a Saquon Barkley. That's a guy that carried carried the Giants into the playoffs this past year, I think, and really was able to unlock a lot of opportunities for Daniel Jones to cash in as a passer. So he was absolutely critical to them getting to the playoffs. In the first year under Brian Dable. But when you look you look at players like that. Jonathan Taylor is probably another one that's critical to the Colts' success. They had a bad year. He's hurt. He's not playing. And I get that part of it where we look at these running backs and we say these teams are really successful when they have them. So how do you weigh how a running back being crucial to a team to dollar amount?
Well, there's a few different points I want to make on that. I think look at the Colts and the Giants. The Colts didn't have a great defense, but the Giants had a pretty good defense, an overachieving defense. Mm-hmm. So the thing about running backs is they're crucial because you have to have them, but they don't allow you necessarily to score fast. If your running back is the star of your offense, you're not going to be a high-scoring team, and you're not going to score fast. So you still need receivers. And you probably need to keep the score low, which the Giants did a lot last year. The Giants won a lot of nail-biters. When they beat the Packers, what did they do to Aaron Rodgers? It was first and goal inside the 10 or something. And I think they forced 4 incompletions against him or something. So the defense has to help you out, right? And I think that's the blueprint is if the running back is a star of your offense, you better make sure that the scoreboard has some low numbers on it. And you have to understand that your identity is going to be a physical football team because, like I said, you don't score fast. And it's going to be a lot of ugly wins, a lot of grinded out, pounded out wins because the Giants were an ugly offense last year. It was never pretty. It was never throw the ball around the yard. Daniel Jones was never doing anything that was really aesthetically pleasing. It was he runs the ball here and there. They throw some screens. They give Barkley a bunch of carries and touches. They might get to the receivers here and there. But Jones had some ugly statistics last year. Some of those box scores after the game, I'm like, dude, I want that 3 hours of my life back. That was horrible to watch. But they won 12-10 or you know what I mean. It's not ideal. So I think sure, running backs are crucial, but that's saying cars are crucial for me to get to work. So I need a Lamborghini. No, I got a Corolla out there. I'll find another car. It's not. I don't need the best of the best. I need serviceable, something that gets the job done. And the other things are what I really need to excel. I need good receivers. I need a good O-line. I need everything else to be good. But the running backs are the one thing where they can be decent. I can find them in the 7th round, something like that,
Yeah. I'm going to keep bringing that up. So Pacheco. Oh, yeah. We'll pull it. Yeah, we'll pull it.
Or even Pacheco.
Honestly, the 4th or 5th round, too. I mean, you look at the Bears drafted Roschon Johnson in the 4th round, and we know that Roschon's going to be the number 1 running back on that team this year when you look at that roster. And then the same thing
Look at Damian Pierce out of Florida. Look at Brian Robinson from Alabama. Look at who's the other? Damian Harris from Alabama. You can find those middle round guys who have vision and power and enough size to get the job done. You don't need the Bijans. And I think that's really the key. Isaiah Pacheco is probably more of the exception, not the rule. But you can look in the middle rounds and see, starter. They might not be dynamic starters. They might not be guys that you think are irreplaceable. But they're guys that are going to get the job done. I think if the Chiefs had Brian Robinson or Damian Pierce, they would have probably been just as good as they were with Pacheco. And I think that should be the point. You know what I mean? Pacheco, again, yeah, we're overdoing him a little bit.
Well, yeah, the Lamborghini is a good thing to point out because so everybody has to pay the same amount of money. Everybody's got the same amount of money. And so obviously when you have different people living in let's say you got 32 different people living in this neighborhood, everybody's going to allocate that money differently. They're going to find certain priorities to their lives. And typically when everybody's in that sort of same class in the neighborhood, you're not going to see a Lamborghini parked out there. And if you do, right, they're not doing too well anywhere else, right? The house might be falling apart here and there. The roof looks like it's about to cave in. And I think that's a great analogy actually, because, do you need a Lamborghini to get to work? No, that's a great analogy. It's perfect.
Thanks, buddy.
But it's also like a car too, right? An offense is like a car where you got the quarterback driving it. And, the running backs are kind of the tires. What's the first thing you replace on an offense?
Oh, dude, that's good too. Good for you, man. You're crushing it.
I can't claim it. I heard this one from another player.
Okay.
No, it's perfect. It was perfect. But that's exactly what it is. And the wide receivers and the skill positions, they're the engine. You open up, you pull up the hood, and that's what makes it roll. And then you got the frame, and the frame, the alignment, all that. That's your lineman. And so your offense is
viewers can tell how stupid I am because as you're saying this, I'm just like, my mind is blowing. I'm like, dude, bro.
No, that's exactly what it is, right? And the running backs. So the running backs right now, to kind of play into this analogy that you started with the Lamborghini, they're car salesmen and they're trying to sell Lamborghinis.
Right.
to this neighborhood.
Take this Lambo, bro. Yeah.
Hey, I get my commission. I'm good. But it's so hard to see a something positive for the outlook of that position getting paid. And honestly, the only way that you're going to do it, there's got to be some sacrificial lambs that come in here and make some things like quit, like Sony Michel did.
Right.
But you got to have higher impact guys do this now if you want to make this thing happen.
And they're not going to because they might win a Super Bowl. Christian McCaffrey went to the Niners because he's an elite back who can play receiver if he really wanted to. He really could. Mm-hmm. He's one of the few. That's not a thing most running backs can do. But he's not going to quit early because he's the best, maybe the most talented all-around running back we have in the NFL. And he went to a team where he thinks the Super Bowl window is, probably 2, 3, 4 years, and he's going to try and win it. I don't think the answer is going to be quitting. These they can try, but then they're getting paid nothing. I think. Yeah,
their careers are over if they try. Yeah, that's the thing. That's why I said sacrificial lamb, because it's like you get several top end guys to just quit. And now all of a sudden teams kind of go, oh, okay, maybe we have to pay these guys, because if I think it's something that's got to continuously happen though, and the closest we've ever seen to anything like that, and it wasn't ever money, was Barry Sanders quitting in his prime. But that's kind of that's the thing. It's like, what do you do? I don't see any way that these running backs create any leverage right now. I can't see it.
No, I don't think they have any. I don't think they're really going to gain any either, unless, like you said, they all just basically go on strike like the Hollywood writers or something, and they're just like, we're done, man. But again, look at how many running backs are in college. Look at how many running backs are in the USFL or the XFL. Like, the NFL will find their guys who want to get paid and just want to play ball. They might not be as good as some of these NFL players, but that's just not going to help the leverage of these NFL guys that want to get paid. So.
Yeah, it's a bad situation, for if you're a running back, there just isn't any clear answer to it. I've seen, things thrown around that maybe you readjust the franchise tag so that quarterbacks are tagged, receivers and running backs and tight ends are all in the same position group, but that's not going to help the running backs either because now nobody's getting tagged, because they're not going to dish out $18-19 million to a running back. Yeah. And pay him like a wide receiver. That's just not going to happen, So.
No, I think this is genuinely one of those scenarios where it's not a matter of if we do this, and this, things can change. This is like in the foreseeable future, there's no leverage. There's really not a good way where this can work out for these guys. It's not going to happen. And I think either we're going to see a lot of position changes in the future. That might be the only thing is, a lot of these kids coming out of high school, like you said, switch positions, and then we have a running back shortage. But that would take, take some, that would take a while. And I, like you said, I don't think kids are going to have that type of commitment. Bucky Brooks coaches high school football. Bucky Brooks from NFL,
moving the sticks. Yep.
Yeah, with the Sticks podcast, his high school football team made it to the state title game without throwing a single pass. They were on like the wing tee or something. They didn't throw a pass. So the quarterback was basically irrelevant. He was a running back basically. Mm-hmm. There's no receivers. Everyone's a running back. The whole team. So sure, we can say, switch positions. Don't do this, don't do that. But high school football, like you also said earlier, these quarterbacks aren't overly skilled. The offenses aren't, what they are in college of the NFL. So receivers also aren't getting their due. They're not getting to show out like they would if they got to carry the ball more. Some high schools, sure, yes. But overall, these kids want to play running back still. And that's how they get to get the ball and get their touches and put up their highlight reels together for these colleges to look at. So it's a problem with really no solution in the near future.
So as we get into the back end of the show, when we start talking about nuances at the position, I know that you definitely have certain things that you're looking for, because I know that I have certain things I'm looking for at the running back position in terms of nuance. The deep stuff beyond just being able to run, being able to catch, being able to pass protect. What are a couple of those nuances that you really like?
Big thing for me with running backs is tempo, I would say. And that's the way that running backs kind of manipulate the defense, or the way they hit the hole, it's like a running back running a route. If you just run as fast as you can every single time, or a wide receiver, sorry. If you just run as fast as you can every single time, cornerback can probably keep up with you. If he's just as fast as you, he's just going to run with you. But you watch guys like Calvin Ridley and Justin Jefferson, they might not be as fast all the time, but they know how to alter their stride patterns. They know how to move their hips and their heads. They know how to kind of lull cornerbacks to sleep and then take off. They use tempo. And I think a lot of the best running backs can do that. They can read the second level defenders. And, if a linebacker's over pursuing a little bit, you cut it back. If he's a little slow reading you in the hole, you take it front side and beat him to the edge. The best ones do that, whether they're, and you can do that at any level or at any caliber of player. We've seen slower guys do it. Like Mark Ingram was a master of that, where I always felt when I was watching him, evaluating him coming out, thinking like, how is he doing this? How is he so slow sometimes and just whomping defenses on the second level? And you would watch him, and he was just eyes on the flow of the defense, eyes on the second and third levels, waiting for them to make their move, and then he would counterpunch and go off of that. Some of the worst ones I've seen do it, I remember Lake Seastrunk at Baylor, and I remember Royce Freeman at Oregon. And they were both, Lake Seastrunk had home run speed. He was a fluid mover. Royce Freeman had solid speed. He had a little bit of burst. He had good size. But they were these guys where they would get the ball and just sprint. And it was almost like the defenses knew where to find them and when to find them. They were always on schedule because they didn't read anything. They were just going. And they're easier to stop. Where, I'm trying to think. Oh, Dalvin Cook was another one. He was a master of getting the ball. He would pitter-patter, and you're almost frustrated, like, go, 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 go. But he would wait for the defense to make their move, and, dude, he was gone. And that's why he hit so many home runs in college. And it wasn't like he was a burner. He was, probably a 4.45 or something is what he ran. So he's fast enough, but he made defenses look silly all the time. Bijan Robinson last year was similar to that, where you could tell he really understood tempo and what the second-level defenders were doing to try and stop him. I also think guys who can create in space. I think Derrick Henry's of the world, like you said earlier, are kind of phasing out. Even Nick Chubb sometimes. Those two frustrate me because they don't create well for themselves. And if there's immediate penetration into the backfield, or if the offensive line does one thing wrong, those two can be stopped a little early because they're not super, super creative and they're not overly fluid in their lower bodies. They're kind of more, you get them on schedule, get them a runway, and good luck. But they're not the guys who can dance, and then still go like some others. So creative guys who understand tempo, that's really, I think, what sets apart the best from the rest. Because a lot of them are just as talented. You could say a lot of guys are equally as talented as some of these NFL studs, but they're not as skilled. They don't do the things the same way. They don't see the game the same way. They don't read the flow and feel the speed of the game the same. So that's something that is really, I think, important when you're evaluating running backs to look into.
So the one thing that I really like is, and I measure this in two ways, is contact balance. Right. Because if you look at where we talked about when Matt was on here talking about wide receivers, we talked about contact balance and becoming a running back in the open field. Contact balance, I think, is a key. Being able to shed that first tackle. And so I measure it in two ways. The first way would be at the first level, and still inside the box. And I call that in contact balance in power, right? So when you got a guy and he hits his hole, and that first defender is trying to arm tackle him coming off of a lineman, the first line, whatever that is, and he can shed him off and work up to the second level, I think that that's something, 2-3 extra yards, it adds up over time, especially if you've got a line that's penetrating.
Sure.
And then I measure it as well. It's contact balance in space. And so that goes in the creativity that you were talking about, because sometimes you got to be creative in your lower half to set up a defender, so that when he comes up on a guy and that defender's starting to settle down to make the tackle, you got to put him in a position where he's going to miss. Or if he doesn't miss just enough to where you can break it. And that's where that contact balance comes in, right? And, Le'Veon Bell, I think, was a guy that was so good at that. You would watch him set up defenders. He was so amazing, just incredible, with the way that he could set up defenders in both of those areas, power and in space. And then after that, I think, honestly, the big thing is, you talk tempo is a really great one, but burst, man. It's burst. It's explosion, right? Because you can set up the defender. You can have the tempo, but if you don't have that step coming off of it, and you hit that hole, good luck, buddy. You better be great at that contact balance, right? The burst really is an extra step, and I think that's what made Pacheco so good. These one-cut guys like that, where they just have this insane level of burst, they accelerate almost seamlessly, and they can get one defender in the wrong spot, and bam, they're gashing, they're slashing. And I think that's the key. Those are a couple of keys I'm looking for at running backs. And you look at this year at guys, I don't know how many running backs you've looked at in this class coming up, but I'm going to mention Donovan Edwards out of Michigan.
Michigan, okay.
Not Blake Corum, not the guy that started most of the year before he got hurt. I'm talking about the guy that played after him, Donovan Edwards. Yeah. He's incredible at those couple things. First off, the contact balance when he hits the hole, and then just exploding. As soon as he gets to his cut. I mean, he's ridiculous at both of those things. And one of my favorite running backs for that reason, I think Marshawn Lloyd, who used to be at South Carolina, just transferred to USC. That's another one of those guys that I really like as a one cut. I'll be real. I'm a one cut guy. I love one cut running backs.
We have our biases, and that that's the way it goes. But I'm with you. I like the bursty guys. I always think it's great to hit the 60, 70 yarders. But sometimes that's not there, or sometimes you need to be able to hit 10 to hit that. Like sometimes you don't get that runway where you can just go. You're going to have to, kind of get your way out of traffic for a second, and then you can hit that home run if it's there. But the build-up speed running backs don't really do it for me either, because they get caught a lot in the backfield. They get caught in the second level. But if you can explode in small areas and get yourself out of, away from everybody, that's very, very important. I'd rather have a guy who consistently hits 10 to 15 than occasionally hits the home run, because you got to keep the offense on schedule. So,
absolutely. Yep. You got a favorite running back in this class yet?
I think I haven't studied too many, but Trevion Henderson from Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those runs that I don't know if it was last year or the year before.
The year before, I think he was hurt a lot of last year. So
yeah, I think so it was the year before that. I watched a bunch of the Ohio State tape the other day, and when I got done looking at it, I was like, I watched games for multiple years. I don't even know what was what. I didn't even remember to check which one. I just went. But he had a few runs where he's even, and the other guy, the defender is already moving faster, and you're like, he's gonna get him, and then dude just lightning bolts away from him. I'm like, at his size, he shouldn't be that bursty, but I think he's got some special ability. He's not the most make you miss type of guy, but the frame on him and the power he has too. So far, I think he's the best I've seen. There was one other one that I was watching the other day. I liked Will Shipley out of Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
He better not get the McCaffrey comparisons, because
white guy playing running back.
We get it. They're both white, but yeah, Shipley is very much like a speedy but powerful straight line runner.
You thought he was speedy? Because I kind of watch him, and I think 4.6. That's what I see when I watch.
Keep watching is all I would say. There are some times where you're like, he's fast, and then sometimes where, here's the thing, he doesn't have the best hips, so it's almost like if he's not if he's having to kind of lean or accelerate through the corner or accelerate while angling someone off, he'll look slow. But if you get him to open up his gate and just go fast. But his lower body is not great. It's not that fluid of a lower body. And I don't think he's going to be a first-round guy. I've seen that, floated out there a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't.
second,
the
third
Clemson
round.
thing and the
Absolutely.
recruiting rankings. Yeah, I don't think he's a first round guy by any means, but I haven't seen too many more. A few of the Bama guys I've seen. Ask me in another week or two because I started getting the tape pretty hard recently, but yeah, I haven't gotten too deep yet. The receivers I've gotten pretty deep, but that's about it.
So I'll give you one. I'll give you a guy I really like. I'll give you two, and then we'll wrap this thing up because we got to make way for Adam Rank on this platform. Adam Rank,
Yeah,
salute to
big
that
dogs.
Man. Yeah, big
Yeah.
dogs. So Caleb Hood, North Carolina. That's a guy that I really like.
Okay, is he related to Elijah Hood from like years ago? The North Carolina kid.
I have no idea if I'm being honest, but
remember him?
so yeah, no, I remember Elijah
Okay.
absolutely, but I have no idea. But Caleb, you want to talk about a guy that reminds me of AJ Dillon, but can catch.
Okay.
He's
big boy.
He's got the long strides. He's a little bit smaller. I think he's at 225, not 240. But he's got the long strides. He's got the big giant thighs, good hips, and he can catch out of the backfield very well. He was hurt a lot last year too, so he didn't play as much. But if you go turn on that Miami game when Drake May, and they went down there and it was a close one against Miami, he had some plays that you're watching going, AJ Dillon, absolutely.
I gotta get into that.
And then the other guy is, and I'm not just saying this for nostalgia, I'm saying this because I actually like this guy, is Frank Gore Jr.
Okay.
Southern Mississippi. He's had to do a lot of different things in that offense, played some Wildcat quarterback too. In fact, they had to play 2021, the last 3 games exclusively at Wildcat quarterback because they didn't have one. It's interesting. Oh, it's interesting.
I think you were posting videos or something. I remember this now.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, he's playing. He's playing the last 3 games. I think they won. I think they end up 1-2, which is surprising when you're in that situation. But he's got that tempo that you're talking about, man. You're gonna like that when you see him. Absolutely.
Yikes! All right, good to know. Good to know. Who's the best running back you've ever evaluated to this point?
Ever? Oh.
Yeah, that you've done like an actual evaluation on. Who's your highest graded running back?
Highest ever. Man, I got to go back a few years. I got to think. And I'm not going to claim recency bias. Okay, this is not recency bias. I think that this is actually legit. I think it's Bijan. Because
why not?
Everything that guy can do. I hope he hit. I hope he hits now. Well, I hope he's just
not
this
gonna miss.
Absolute star.
Well,
but we said that about Trent Richardson.
Yeah, no, but Bijan is clearly different. You know what I mean? Like Trent Richardson is that 1 out of a million. Bijan is just he was so safe coming out. I think I have a huge bias for like the real elite burst, like Dalvin Cook, Jahmyr Gibbs. I remember LaShawn McCoy coming out. And I remember thinking when LaShawn McCoy fell out of the first round, like, what are we doing? That was also 13. I don't even know how long ago.
I remember 2009.
He came to the combine 198, so he was sub 200. And back then, that was blasphemy for a running back. So I kind of had a feeling like, he's going to fall out of the first round. But I was young, and I was like, I don't know enough. And sure enough, he did. But in college, go watch, if anyone wants to go watch LaShawn McCoy highlights, he was outrageous in college. I mean, a man amongst boys. It looked like a senior in high school, like playing, with
junior varsity.
Yes, like elementary school kids. You're like, how is he not being touched? Unbelievable talent. He was one of the best running backs I've ever seen. Saquon Barkley, obviously.
What's funny is I didn't like Saquon as much coming out. I actually. And this was a huge miss for me, and it was more for off-field reasons. I had Darius Geis over him.
I did at one point, and then I was like, I can't. Here's the thing. Geis was crazy in college. He had that 200 and something yard game against Texas A&M. Geis was good, and he had enough speed to hit the home runs. The difference between him and Saquon Barkley was Geis had great vision. He was a true pro. Like a real pro running back who could,
if he had been able to stay out of trouble off the field.
Where Barkley was faster, more talented overall, but sometimes in college, the 10-yard gain was right in front of him, and he would say screw it and try and go dance somewhere else and lose 5. And it was always like
that was my big complaint about him, right?
I tweeted a lot was like, Barkley's elite, but is he going to keep the offense on schedule, or is he going to make them, regret putting him in for certain plays because they're like, dude, we had it and you messed it up.
And that's
at Penn State, he was that guy.
He was tackled for loss. He lost more yards than any running back in the country, which was an interesting stat. And that was one that I was kind of holding on to, going, I don't know about this, guys. I don't know.
Yeah, buddy. But he was so like that run against USC. You're like, all right, he's an alien. Like, no other.
I can't put it on one run, man. I can't. And that's why I went with Geis over him. And I think Geis was 2 points higher on the grade than Barkley was. And it was just because I thought that Geis was going to be that guy that was going to be consistent, getting those 5-10 yard gains, and Barkley was going to be that wild card. So we'll never know. Absolutely.
Adrian Peterson was the other one where that was my first year when I started really watching college prospects, and I was like, I don't know who this person is, but he's not from this planet. But I didn't really evaluate him. I just watched him and was like, that's a not person. Something's wrong with him. That's a machine. He was out of this world.
Yeah, Peterson, obviously, NFL pro. He'll be all pro. He'll be a Hall of Famer here as soon as he's eligible. Absolutely. Yeah. But that should just about wrap up the show today, dude. I think it was a good conversation. That
was a nice time, man.
Yeah, got a lot knocked out talking about this running back contract situation and some of the things that you're looking for when evaluating a running back. We'll be back at it next week. Until then, thank you. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for the 1K on the last video. Let's see if we can do that again, maybe with the running back. We'll see. And thank you to Sammy and everybody in the studio that in the background that do this, that make this show possible. We appreciate you and the work that you do too, because without you guys, obviously, there is no Sick Podcast Network. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and sign out. For Justin Gamble, I'm John Vogel. Thanks for watching.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Draft Vogel on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.